what we're seeing is a big pivot toward the articulation of ROI for not just your tool, but helping people understand how your tool also fits in this ever expanding technology stack. And if your business can't articulate like how you fit into a tech stack, what your role is, and what would happen if you were to remove that piece, then I think that that business is in trouble.
Welcome to the Peerbound Podcast. I'm your host, Sunny Manivanan. Joining me today is Jason Perocho, the SVP of Marketing at Amperity. Jason has an incredible background. He is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, after which he was a pilot in the US Navy and then later worked at the Pentagon. And after that, he joined the private sector and has held marketing roles in companies like Salesforce, where he was in product marketing and a product marketing leader that entire time, and then later joined Braze, where Jason and I were colleagues for a good part of our time there. And most recently joined Amperity, where he is now the Senior Vice President of Marketing. Jason, it is such an honor to have you on the Peerbound Podcast finally. Welcome.
Thanks, Sunny. And man, what an intro.
Definitely. Well-deserved. And we're going to dig into your story, which I'm really excited about. Tell me a little bit about, that transition from public sector to private sector. How did you end up in marketing?
The honest answer is I never really intended to end up in marketing, but found my way here just because I had a passion for it. You mentioned that I graduated the academy and became a pilot. Unfortunately, one day I was in training and landed, and I had this crazy pain in my abdomen. I looked down and was like, oh God, what is that? I decided to put it off for as long as possible, as all good pilots do, because they don't want to get disqualified. But eventually the day came that I said, let's get this checked out. Went in for a routine visit, but 3 weeks later, got a call, found out it was unfortunately cancer, which grounded my pilot career, but began my marketing career, which I know is a really weird segue. But my time in the Pentagon was ultimately writing speeches for a secretary. Once the assistant secretary for the Navy, then assistant secretary of defense. And, if you could sell Congress on a budget, you could sling enterprise software.
I mean, incredible background. And when you first joined Salesforce, what was that process like? What were the interviews like? How did they perceive your background? Did they know what skills you brought to the table? Did you know what you were getting into when you joined the private sector and the technology industry?
No, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I remember sitting through my first few interviews in business school and absolutely just flailing. I did not know how to interview coming out of the military. In fact, before I went into tech, I thought maybe I'd want to be a CPG marketer. And this unnamed company basically flat out told me and said, hey, we don't believe military folks are creative enough to do marketing. I was like, well, wait, what? Oh, okay. I mean, takes some creativity to land a plane on a carrier, but okay, fine. Everybody to each their own. But when I finally started getting into it and I discovered CPG marketing wasn't for me, and it was more in the tech, the high speed, because I just love interesting tech. That's why I flew planes. I started realizing that getting in and breaking in super hard, mainly because we have, as veterans, have trouble translating our skill set from our military life to our professional life. Not only that, it's hard to find companies that are willing to take a chance on you that say, hey, we see that value of that old skill set and we're willing to invest time and resources to help you develop in this environment now.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it now, more than a decade later, clearly the dots fall into place very nicely. But I can imagine at the time it was not exactly clear, perhaps even you. How did you know that you were going to be a great marketer? There's no way you could have known at that time.
I did always find something exciting about taking these complex ideas when I was in the military and just simplifying it down. In the military, we have the KISS acronym, or Keep It Simple, Stupid. And that's just a mantra that's just in the back of my head. It's all right, cool technology, great conversation engineer, but explain it to me I'm in third grade or I'm in high school. I just get such a thrill out of that and evangelizing these new technologies that was all over Silicon Valley and beyond. just making it relatable to all my friends that don't live inside of this tech sphere. So like that was like one of the reasons why I knew that this is kind of a calling, a place that I like absolutely just wanted to be.
Totally. And I mean, heck, even within 5 minutes of talking to you about this, I've already figured out a few things that, ex-military veterans can contribute in the workplace. So surprising that all these recruiters couldn't figure that out after all these conversations, but glad we're here. Let me ask you a little bit about your sort of first private sector role. What surprised you in a positive way? And then what surprised you in not quite a positive way?
What surprised me in a positive way when I went to Salesforce was just how much structure they had around the product marketing position. I later found out like Salesforce is one of those companies that revolutionized the idea of product marketing. So at Salesforce, like product marketing really is the lead growth engine. When it comes to executing big strategy, it's all on product marketing to coordinate across the entire go-to-market teams. And, there's such a well-oiled machine that just like simply plugging in and doing the everyday job was just head and heels above like what some of my other cohorts were learning at other companies. So it gave me this like great foundation to build off of and innovate on top of. But when it comes to like the hard things were really around messaging. Writing speeches is one thing for Congress, but getting short, concise, pithy for the private sector was just a whole nother level. And I remember going in and writing my first press release and having to present it to a woman. Her name was Jane at Salesforce. Those at Salesforce know who this Jane is. She would put it up on the board when you brought it in and just rip it to shreds. She's like, don't know what that means. What is that? That's inside baseball. Can you even write English? I was like, oh, whoa. I thought my military instructors were intense. This is a whole nother level of intensity right now. But I thank her and all my mentors there at Salesforce for everything they taught me about positioning and messaging. It was a crucible to get through there, but to get through positioning and messaging. But I think it's the only way that product marketers truly learn.
Yeah, your story reminds me of, so my first job out of college was at GE Aviation, where, this, I used to, build aircraft engines. That was my first job out of college, was in aerospace engineering. And my Jane at Salesforce was named Tyler at GE. And anybody from that part of my life is listening to this will remember very similar feedback delivered in a very similar way. But, looking back on it all these years later, it's very valuable.
Yeah. One of the lessons is just to take feedback and know that it's not personal. They are trying to get you better, but sometimes, especially at that executive layer, they don't have the time to put all the feelings around it and be like, embrace you with a hug. They're just like, nope, yes, nope, go fix. It's a hard lesson to learn for some folks.
Yeah. I mean, this is a rabbit hole we could go down for forever. But one of the things that I've reflected on about feedback, and you really just said this, is when somebody's just saying to you something very directly, that's just how they're thinking in their brain. And they're just comfortable enough with you to just say it the way that they think it. And now we've added all this sort of extra layers of political correctness, and I've got to say it a certain way and so on. And, some of that is useful and important, and it's important to be respectful. But now we've gone too far the other way, where it's no longer clear what this person's trying to communicate. And that's not anybody's, really utility, right?
There are all different types of leaders. Some will sugarcoat it for you. Others will tell you very directly. But I think it's just an ever-evolving skill set on how to manage up to get the information you need out of them to be successful, and then to also recognize that it really isn't personal.
Totally. I love it. Let me ask you a question about, Salesforce is an interesting place to start your tech career, because by the time that you were there, they already had different business units. They already had different products. And on one hand, you are really neck deep in the details of, for example, writing a press release. But on the other hand, you're also representing a company that has so much in revenue, is really a standard bearer for an industry. Any challenges with that? Like, where did you learn from that? How did you deal with that?
Yeah. So Salesforce is a behemoth of a company, but each product was in a specific zone. So there were like 4 zones of products. There were the startups that were just trying to figure out how to make money, call that the tier 1, the 0 to 50 million zone. There were products that were trying to scale for growth. That's like the 50 million to 300 million. There were products that were trying to get to their first billion, which is a whole nother operational scale, which is 250 million to a billion. And then there were the billion plus products that were just giant machines, in order to crank and turn and continue that growth rate that we're targeted at. And, when I went into Salesforce, I didn't know it at the time, but I was being put into this like special category because like that's where like my veteran skill set truly shined at, was like, hey, this kid has some operational rigor. Like he's always looking to scale, but he's not afraid of like these nebulous environments and just go try something. So I found myself always in that tier 2 zone of, hey, here are the products that are 50 million and trying to get to that next growth spurt, which meant really figuring out like what is the product market fit, what is the right use cases that we're specifically going after, and what's the right go-to-market around that product or portfolio to make them successful.
And what an incredible experience. I want to ask you a little bit on the flip side of what did you have to unlearn about Salesforce as you moved on from that behemoth of a company, as you said, to smaller, more nimble companies?
I learned really quickly that how much of a system Salesforce had and how much harder it is to build that system from scratch. You don't even recognize like even the agreement on nomenclature, like what's the purpose of a first call deck? How does the sales process work? What are the expectations at each stage? What are the right video vendors to go to for X, Y, and Z? All of that was thought off to. All you need to do was plug in your great ideas into it. But when you move to a smaller company, it's like, okay, I want to take some of that structure and bring it down, but also right size it for the company that I'm at. And that takes a little bit of experimentation at first, because like you could put too much structure in and frustrate your leaders because you're not producing results fast enough, or you're creating these one-offs, but like nothing's scalable when they're just looking for scale.
Fabulous. Let me ask you a question about career advice. So as you're going through this phase of your career, no doubt, you had mentors and they gave you a whole bunch of advice. What's career advice or any examples of career advice that stick out to you? If you could tell us a story about that, that would be great.
Yeah, I've got two. So,
all right, let's hear it.
The first is to make sure that you pick a job. Don't let a company recruit you. Because like when you pick the job, you're fulfilling a need that you've defined in yourself. When a job is recruiting you, they've defined a need and they're seeing whether you fit inside of it. Now, sometimes these like mutually align up and people get lucky, but through talking with hundreds of folks, people are usually more satisfied when they go out, reach, and get something that satisfies the need of what they want in their career to get to their next level. I always say that you get to pick your first job inside that company, then you get kind of thrown around. Then you start feeling it out whether you like it or not, and you use that as input for your next job.
Totally. Love that. Okay, what was the second piece of career advice?
The second piece of career advice is that you have to have a team around you to be successful. And in order to get by, or get past certain levels, it's not about how smart you are anymore. It's about how well you can navigate really sticky situations. So the team that I recommend everybody have is one, an executive coach. Like an executive coach is there to help you think through in a structured way problems that you'll see in corporate America. Two is a mentor, somebody that's usually a step or two ahead of you that could either pave the way for you or reflect in a close enough time frame that they could give you actionable advice on how to be better at the job you're at in order to get to where you want to go. And the third is a therapist, because in the end, you're going to have to figure out how to emotionally regulate yourself, and you lose the gossip that you might have had when you're like a manager or an individual contributor. You have to figure out a way to compartmentalize that and have a right output for that in order to keep it productive in the workplace and at home. Because trust me, you don't want to come home and just bitch about work all the time. Your partner will be like, can we talk about something else? What about me?
I think that's great advice. And you're so spot on. As you really step into, let's say, the VP levels of an organization, there's just a distance between you and the day-to-day sort of happenings at a company, right? Like things happen, people do crazy things. And most of these things just don't matter at that point, because you're trying to figure out, what are my goals? Am I achieving my goals? Am I helping this company move forward? And am I doing a great job? And is it valuable? And these support systems, I think, often go by the wayside because people say, well, I don't need that. I'm going to do it myself or so on. There's a whole host of excuses that we can all make. But no doubt that if you're serious about your performance, you've got to have a team.
Yep, absolutely.
Really cool. Love that, Jason. Thank you. Let me ask you a little bit about what your priorities are now at Amperity. The technology industry has gone through a lot of changes in the last 2 years. And we're all, I think, not quite inventing a new playbook, but we're dusting off a very old playbook that many of us haven't had to turn to before 2010. I think many of us really started our careers, when it was boom times, and it's just been boom times until 2022. So we're all kind of learning some new muscles. What's top of mind for you at Amperity? Tell me about what you're working on, what you're excited about.
Yeah. I mean, I think with any marketing lead right now, the first thing that's top of mind is performance. Like, are we driving enough pipe? Are we driving the right pipe? Are we helping our sellers advance that pipe? And even after the sale, like, what motions do we have to make sure that we're keeping the customers that we've just spent so much money on acquiring? And, all along the way, we're trying to find the most cost-effective yet personalized journey to do. And it seems like those two are almost at odds with each other. It's like, hey, be cost-effective, but yet personalize the entire experience. And that's exceptionally difficult for us because, like, we at Amperity target enterprise businesses. So businesses that make over 250 million run rate. So, like, there has to be a level of personalization in order to win those types of deals. So first and foremost is that. And then the second with performance is also the health of my team. Like, we can talk and wax poetic about performance, and I could deliver the greatest SQLs and SQOs. But if I'm not looking out for my team and helping them navigate through some of like the trials and these new things and new modals of reaching out to customers and them feeling good about it, then the first thing is just not going to happen. So very much focused in on, like, hey, how can we create a culture of experimentation? How could we create a space in which people can authentically grow? And how do we make sure that as they grow, like their incentives are aligned with business incentives?
Speaking of sort of what you're trying to do and what CMOs are trying to do, would love to get your take on what do you think is, more broadly going on in the software industry or SaaS industry now? Do you think that we're in for a protracted downturn? Do you see any green shoots? How does AI play into all of this? Is there like a next act that's fueled by AI? Where do you stand on where the industry is going?
First and foremost, everybody has to prove their value. I think Gartner has, rang the bell on this one, but 35% of SaaS seats or consumption or whatever you've bought goes unused. It's just shelfware. At the same time, there are more SaaS companies than any time in history. So, like, how are you ensuring that you're getting like the utilization, and even in that utilization, that your customers are seeing value? So I think what we're seeing is a big pivot toward the articulation of ROI for not just your tool, but helping people understand how your tool also fits in this ever expanding technology stack. And if your business can't articulate like how you fit into a tech stack, what your role is, and what would happen if you were to remove that piece, then I think that that business is in trouble. So first and foremost, like, value articulation. AI is super important. And I think that's the question that we're getting pressured a lot from like the C-suite. It's like, hey, how are you using AI to save dollars, to save people, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, I don't want to get left behind the curve. But for all the wonderful predictions about like what AI is, I think there's also at the same time just so much risk around our like AI that at least we see inside of the enterprise segments that businesses are not willing to take on yet. So everything from LLMs being how accurate, like, oh, not there, even if the best are like 98, 99% accurate, that 1% of error is still unacceptable for a lot of CISOs out there. How accurate are predictions? How can we validate those predictions? Can we unpack those models? So, like, as a kind of a future AI state, I don't think that black boxes are the future of AI. Like, we have to, as an industry, let people know like how and why our AI functions the way it does, so that the entire process and all the transformations can be auditable to ensure that businesses are staying in compliance. Because like, even though the reward is high, the risk is equally as high, especially with everybody leaning in with a patchwork of regulations out there.
I love what you said about, even if it's 98% accurate, that still may not be good enough for, some CISOs, especially the enterprise. It certainly wouldn't have, 98% would not have been good enough for you as a pilot. If you were told, all right, get in this plane, it's gonna be fine 98% of the time. And the other 2%, we don't know. Maybe it'll be okay, maybe it won't. I don't think you would have gone on that plane.
It's like giving somebody like 1,000 Skittles, but telling them 20 of them will kill them. But
Right.
go ahead and eat as many as you want. Like,
that's exactly right. Unlimited, free, go for it, free for all.
Yeah. Like, are you going to eat anything from the bag of Skittles? Probably not.
Are you using any AI solutions within your marketing team?
We're using a ton of AI. And in all honesty, I've actually now probably used a combination of perplexity.ai, Claude.ai for 50 to 60% of my searches or my research compared to Google. And I've been training my team as such. We love, for example, in Perplexity, the ability to trace back the source of where that recommendation came from to validate that came from a human being. And in Claude.ai, it's just like really, really good about synthesizing down large meanings and getting to actionable things. So AI is being used in our business to more augment us and take away a lot of the mundane things that we would do. Like, I'm sure even with this podcast, you're going to create a transcript off of it, summarize it, and send a newsletter out to your audience. I think that's a great use. I mean, it's human in the loop. It's productivity focused, not necessarily completely replacing folks at this point.
Yeah, the plane has gone a lot better and more advanced, but the pilot is still there.
There's a lot of talk about, like drones and such, but like we still have pilots flying in the sky, and there's just this risk factor that even with software glitching at 1%, it comes down to almost like a philosophical problem. Would you rather the human make the mistake, or would you rather a artificial intelligence make the mistake? Because who learns from those mistakes, and what are the costs of those outcomes? When we think about piloting commercial airlines, why there might always be a pilot in there, like the optics and just the humanity associated with it is sometimes hard to replace.
You see AI eventually taking some portions of jobs. Like, where do you stand on that? I mean, there's definitely one of the interesting observations as I talk to, other CMOs and just across the SaaS industry is there's a lot of excitement for AI at the C levels. Not as much excitement at the sort of, more, the levels where the real work of an organization gets done, right? Like at the manager level, the director level, and so on. Not as much excitement, some excitement, but not as much. What do you think is going on? How do you see the future of AI in the workplace?
I do think that there will be the ability to do more with less people. Like, I'm just going to call the spade. Because if you're removing all like the transcription time, the meeting summary notes, you're able to get more through. And if you're able to get more throughput through, you might need less people. So I do think there is some aspect of losing some current jobs that we have today. But I also think that there is the creation of future jobs tomorrow that we really can't anticipate at this point, even if they are only temporary, like prompt engineering, for example. Like in our product at Amperity, we have this feature called AmpGPT that allows users to just interrogate their own data and find insights. So like if your CEO has ever given you a one-off question, simply just ask that question in and we'll give you the answer and graph it for you. Now, while that seems just like this magical tool on the surface, it doesn't just happen. It's not like this person's writing SQL code anymore. What they're actually doing now is that they're training the algorithm. They're doing prompt engineering, and they're training what the semantic tags are on all the data so that when natural language is used, the natural language knows how to look up the different rows and columns stored inside of your database. So like that's just an example of how you can see like jobs starting to shift more than necessarily like replace. So like I believe there will be more jobs. The ultimate question is, depending on how fast technology moves, can you create as many new jobs as the jobs that you're destroying?
If history is any indicator, the answer to that question is yes, that you will create just as many new jobs, if not more. Unemployment rates have stayed fairly stable throughout many technology changes, right? There's not many marketers writing with quill and ink anymore. We're all using computers, we're all using the internet, and now we're all using AI. And it seems like the jobs are still there. So it will be very interesting to see how this plays out.
I think even the last thought, I think this is a great opportunity for not so much like the demand generation or the product, even the product marketers. I think it's a great advantage for the creative economy because like in the end, people put value on uniqueness and newness. And so far what I've seen, I haven't seen a lot of AI being able to derive something completely from scratch, being able to bring 20, 40 disparate sources together and create something brand new. Everything is a derivative or almost a copy. I think in the future, people will value more creativity, more out there-ness, more out there thinking. And the thinking that just is obviously comes from a human that might be more imperfect than AI can produce. So creative economy, I think, is going to get a boost here in the future.
We started talking about SaaS, so let me move over to the SaaS talk section of this episode. I want to ask you a couple of questions about different SaaS companies and what are your thoughts. I'll start off by asking you, what is your favorite SaaS company homepage? And the only company you can't mention is your current one. So tell me your favorite SaaS company homepage.
I thought about this for a little bit. I have a nephew out there that loves like interactive games online because like every other kid, just kind of addicted to the iPad at this time. But there's this company called Spline that creates 3D games, 3D images. And I love it because their homepage is so interactive to show like what their value is. Not only that, like they show like this beautiful, like what you're able to create, like and have some experimentation on the front page. But on the back side, their doc site is super clean and very solution oriented. Because as great as the technology is that you're presenting forward, there has to be some probably hands-on keyboard person making that happen. And they are going to need some guidance on how to utilize your product. So like I think docs, like having a great doc sites, it's easy to navigate, that's descriptive, that helps people figure out the ins and outs of their product is just absolutely amazing.
Okay, amazing. Spline.design is the homepage.
Yeah.
For those of you interested. That's very cool. Tell me a little bit, we're obviously in the customer story business. So I get obsessed with customer stories and I've read so many customer stories now over the last few months. What's your favorite SaaS customer story? And why do you like it?
One customer story is more of a highlight of like for marketers out there that are worried about their brand and why brand is so important. The customer story that was told by us was given by Mark Benioff, and he was talking about how they were trying to break into the Barclays account. Barclays being the largest bank over there overseas in the United Kingdom. And, Mark had us prepare for weeks for this to think of every in and out this person could possibly say, complete review of the roadmaps, like we are breaking into this business. He meets with the president, sits down, and when he sits down, Mark starts his pitch and the CEO just goes, stop. I don't care. He said that anybody could come in here and pitch me their software. And guess what? I have more money than God. I could probably go create that myself. What I want to know is, do you actually believe in the values that are on your website? Like, do you really donate 1% of time, money, equity to businesses, to like charities like LGBTQ? And, Mark was like, oh yeah, well, absolutely. Like, here's X, Y, here's Z, here's like all the things that we've done in the past year. And he pushed, he was like, so like, why? And he said, well, my son recently came out as gay and I want to do business with people that have the same values as me and support like my family. So like, tracing this all the way back to customer stories, it's like, yes, the problem, the solution, the aha moment are important, but like the real gold on customer stories is really when you align values between brands and you highlight that value, because like in the end, the entire model of SaaS is that it's software as a service. You could leave at any time. Vendors need you to be there for 3 years to even make back the cost of acquiring you. So it's really about putting that relationship first and making sure that when you're communicating out in this customer story, you're communicating the values of your company and why people would want to work with you.
Absolutely. Love that story.
That's one of my big stories. And it's really stuck with me for a while, and just always, as a marketer in me, like, hey, tell the product story, but also be human and tell the story about like how the brands like complement each other.
Absolutely love that story. And, so spot on that we all tend to get really excited about the product and we forget about the people. And still, it's a partnership that is beyond just technology. It's a real person to person partnership that hopefully will go on for a long time. And like you said, the vendor wants this relationship to be a forever relationship, and it's going to go through ups and downs. And it's really about who's on the other side of the table, not what technology is on the other side of the table.
Yeah. People don't buy technology because it's cool and has a slick UI and it solves a problem. They buy technology because they have a feeling that it'll make them better. It'll get them promoted because like in the end, there's like a personal reason why. So if you're not like putting not just the customer, but the person, the champion at the forefront of your story, you're not telling that story correctly.
Right on. I want to ask you a little bit about, favorite technologies that you use. If you could give me, this time I will let you do two, one personal and one business. Tell me a little bit about what technologies you really like to use.
Oh man, I probably already gave it away, but qual.ai/perplexity.ai are two of my absolute favorite tools. They save me so much time. They help me ideate. They help me summarize notes. They help me research. It's just so much more easier and intuitive than Google using the, quotes, plus signs, all the stuff that you used to do in order to get search engines to perform for you. It just absolutely amazing. If you're not using it, you're probably behind. So that's my professional. As for personal, it's on honestly Strava. I am a workout fiend. Sometimes I do 2 workouts a day. I think keeping my body in shape it helps me keep my mind in shape. But I also like tracking things and gamification of things. So the fact that I could track every single workout, see my progress, and also compete with my friends on who's running longer distances, who's lifting heavier weight is super huge for me. I did learn to shut off the location sometimes, when you're on military bases, because that was a big no-no in the military. But, after that little hiccup, absolutely love it now that I'm a civilian again.
Amazing. That's outstanding. Love that. Let me ask you, let's go to the Peerbound talk section where we just talk about your peer influences, who's your inspiration, or what, inspires you. And I'd love to start off by asking you about a book or a movie that you'd recommend to everybody that, you've sort of consumed recently.
I thought about this question a lot because you did prepare me for it. But I've changed my mind since, and I think a great book is Slaughterhouse-Five, written by Kurt Vonnegut, because I love the way that it's structured, because it's structured by not being structured at all. It's about this guy, Kilgore Trout, that can jump around to any time point in his life. So as you're reading this story, you're not reading it from birth to his death. You're just reading about little anecdotes and learning along the way about what makes this person who he is. I think that's the most applicable way to even think about marketing and kind of the mindset that you need in marketing. Like nobody's ever going to lay out to you the full customer journey. You're just going to get bits and pieces of it. And as you're reading it, you're going to have to put it all together and make the story in your head and figuring out what that means and how to apply it to other people. So it's like that, like non-linear thinking, but also able to piece things together and create your own story or truth out of it, I think is totally essential to be successful in this industry.
I love that. I mean, so spot on that we exist in different timelines and we exist at different levels of detail as marketers all the time.
Yep.
And we also exist in a completely incomplete world where we wish we had 90% more information than we actually do have. And, there's just no way. There's no way.
Then if you're looking for a professional book, there's a great resource that I always refer back to. It's called FYI, or For Your Information. It's not something that you read back to front, but it's an executive book that's very situational. It provides context on like different situations that you'll be either managing your teams, managing your peers, or managing your bosses, and how to work through those in like very digestible frameworks. It's something that you just rabbit ear and bookmark and you come back to as you see the problems arise. Like no need to memorize it all, but it's just such a great bookshelf reference material to figure out how to be a better leader.
Amazing. Love that as well. I know this is a dangerous question to ask a Salesforce alum because there's so many amazing marketers that started their career or spent a significant amount of time in Salesforce. But my last question to you is, who is your favorite SaaS marketer? And on this one, you can give me as many names as you can muster and tell me why.
There's just a laundry list of people to name. Going to like my very first boss, Mike Stone, who saw something raw and was like, yes, outside thinking from the traditional SaaS world, let's hire him and develop him in a whole new way. And he hired a team of outside thinkers, whether it was this woman, Lisa Henderson, who had advised me on more branding. She created the Katy Perry persona. There was Simona Kritz, who was like my first manager, who like founded like Google like Marketing Germany. Even like my peers like Julian Armington and Mehdi Dalvarian to help me understand different aspects of working with the sales teams. God, I could just go on and on like throughout that, like through the Salesforce journey. But if I just jump to the chase and answer the question directly, it's somebody that we both know very well, and her name is Sarah Spivey. The reason being is that I've had a lot of great leaders in my life. I've never had great leaders that are also just effective communicators to get me to run in a direction. Sarah's one of those people that you can sit down with for 15 to 30 minutes and get marching orders for the next week. Like, the thing that I want to emulate is to be able to like so succinctly summarize like my advice and pointedly push people in a direction that requires very little words. Even the story's too long. She would have probably said it in like 10 seconds and given like a really thoughtful answer why. So my shout outs to Sarah Spivey.
I love it, and love all those names in the walk down memory lane as well. And Sarah, as you know, was a former guest, on the Peerbound Podcast. She was awesome, and I can't wait to share more from that conversation in the coming months and years. But yeah, she was just an incredible person, incredible manager, and great to reminisce jointly. And everything you said was also my experience. So she was very consistent across the board. And we all loved her. So great stuff. And thank you, Jason. This was just an incredible conversation. I really enjoyed this tremendously. Loved your perspectives on AI in the future, as well as, what are we all experiencing as, people in the SaaS industry today versus a couple of years ago even. And really, really loved hearing your stories of, moving away from public sector and military into the private sector, and how that's sort of shaped you into the marketer and leader that you are today. So just thank you so much for joining me. And looking forward to sharing this episode.
Thanks for having me, Sonny. Always fun to wax poetic with you and catch up.
Love it. Thanks, Jason. See ya.